Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Three Wide. I am Rick. I am joined by Anthony and Peter, and we're here to talk NASCAR in the aftermath of Pocono Raceway yesterday afternoon. One thing can be said: obviously, the weather held. The prognosis for weather yesterday afternoon was really horrible, and the weather held beautifully for the folks that got down to the Tricky Triangle. We've got a full show for you tonight. We want to welcome all of our viewers, welcome the folks from Chase Elliott Nation in as viewers and our loyal subscribers as well. Tonight, we're going to talk about Pocono in the rearview mirror and talk about the racing there, the package. Obviously, we need to talk somewhat about the commentary from drivers that was made after Pocono. We'll talk about drivers that had a good day, great day. Chase Elliott certainly is on a roll, and we talked off air about this guy's going to start putting up some W's one right after another pretty soon. We do want to talk about Kyle Busch, his 55th win yesterday, which that tied him with Rusty Wallace, didn't it? Tied him with Rusty, and where we think he might end up when he decides to call it a career. Obviously, we do want to talk about Kyle's comments in the aftermath of Pocono. We all have some thoughts on what he said and why he said it, and just the general demeanor of arguably one of the best talents in motorsports today. We'll also talk somewhat about drivers that are kind of on the bubble and in a little bit of trouble over the next few weeks if they don't get things going very quickly. So this is a packed evening for all of us. If you have comments, if you have questions, feel free to ask us. I know that Anthony and Peter monitor the comments and monitor the questions that you folks bring forward. This is your show. It doesn't really belong to us. We're just here to talk NASCAR, be a little bit provocative in the way we present some of the topics, and have a good time discussing the sport we all love. So to kick things off, let's talk about Pocono Raceway, the race yesterday afternoon at the Tricky Triangle. Anthony, why don't you get us started with what your thoughts were on the racing, the package, just the overall impression from yesterday afternoon?
I thought, honestly, I thought the race was just like any other Pocono race that we'd seen. The package actually really surprised me and didn't produce the amount of racing that I thought that we were going to see. It did wind up provoking a lot of strategy towards the end of the race between Cruz, who was going to take two tires, who was going to take four. Which I do like to see sometimes that take a role in a race. It did seem like it was really difficult for you to get a run on the cars that were in front of you, especially if you were single file. Side draft seemed to be very effective with the package as it has all year. The biggest criticism of the package has been for Pocono was that it didn't produce those passing opportunities. You weren't able to see those huge giant runs that people thought we were going to see. The draft really was not as effective as a lot of analysts and fans had predicted. But to me, it was more or less of a typical Pocono race where it had its lulls in stage 2 and stage 3. We did get that late race caution, which added a little bit of excitement and drama to it. And I got to say that one pass for the lead that Kyle had on Clint Boyer came at a part of the track that I had no idea, and I would have never bet the farm on coming out of turn 3, going down the front straightaway. That was a move that he probably was hoping was going to work instead of knew, and used it at the perfect time. Didn't play his hand at all during the race and saved it for the perfect opportunity. Kyle Busch hitting that 55 win mark. I see him moving on from there. Obviously, as much as anybody that follows NASCAR would. I think it's an unfair judgment on Pocono because of the string of amazing races we've had. But this was just really kind of another Pocono. It was a crapshoot, and it produced a driver and a winner that I think deserved the win for sure at the end of the race.
Peter, your thoughts on what we saw yesterday afternoon?
Well, I definitely was surprised. Like you guys, I thought that we were going to see these like monster runs down that longest straightaway in NASCAR and in all of auto racing, and was really really caught off guard at the lack of passing that Anthony was talking about before. It just seemed like you couldn't really get a run on somebody, and clean air was as valuable as it's been in the past. It's just it was kind of a shame. It was kind of unfortunate to see that a package that there was a lot of questions about, a lot of excitement around, didn't seem to really deliver. That being said, the Xfinity race, however, put on a great show. That was a show where the drivers were making moves inside and outside of everybody at any moment on any corner, and really thought that was going to set the tone for what we were going to see Sunday. And was a bit disappointed to not see that. That being said, it really was one of your classic Pocono-esque style races. Pocono is typically one of those tracks that's so hard to pass at, and it just seemed like in the later goings of the race, as it got closer to the end of stage 3, that you were looking at a race where strategy, who was going to be the first one in, the first one out, and track position was so key that was really going to kind of set up the race victory. Another thing that really kind of caught me off guard was tires, and how tires didn't play such a valuable role as they have in a couple of races past. I was hearing a lot that 2 tires was the call to make because they just didn't give up a lot. So props to Goodyear for bringing a really strong tire to hold off. But it was kind of crazy to see that 4 tires didn't give you that advantage to get a run on somebody, as we see that at many other tracks. Hoping that there's something that NASCAR and the teams can learn to kind of help the racing at Pocono be a little bit more exciting, a little bit more, I guess, on the edge, as we've seen this new package bring to other tracks and locations for their July race. But overall, I think the biggest winner was, in fact, other than Kyle Busch, of course, was the fans. As Rick said before, the weather held off. It did not look good in the early goings of last week, and into the weekend too. The forecast for Sunday was a bit shaky, so I'm glad the fans got some good weather to go enjoy that race, because when the weather's nice in Pocono, as the 3 of us can attest to, it is a gorgeous and beautiful place to go to. It's a beautiful facility and a place that is awesome to watch a race.
You know, as I was watching the race yesterday and I was listening to a lot of the interviews that were post race, listening to some of the stuff on the radio today, the thing that occurred to me was there were several things that occurred to me actually um, as I looked at Pocono and the results from yesterday. And what you guys said about the package is absolutely true. I went back and I listened to our show from a few nights ago, and we were all pretty pumped up about the fact that we've had some great racing. Talladega was a very good race. Kansas was outstanding. The 600 couldn't have been better. And we all kind of looked at this package and said, aha, all the teams are starting to master it. The tracks are adapting to the way the driving takes place at their venue. There was really no reason going in to Sunday's race to think that we were going to end up with what many people have called a stinker. Um, I have to tell you, and we were talking a bit about this off air. You can compare and contrast NASCAR to almost any sport in terms of the overall performance of the event itself. We've got over 50 years of history of the Super Bowl. And the reason the NFL historically uses 2 weeks to build up to it is because they're trying to build up that enthusiasm for this great game that's going to take place. And in the over 50-year history, you could probably count on one hand the number of games that were nail biters that captivated everybody's attention. There have been so many Super Bowls where, the overriding theme is who's the halftime show and is the beer still cold? And NASCAR is not going to be any exception. NASCAR is going to have from time to time races that simply and I think that's what we saw yesterday. NASCAR as a sanctioning body didn't have any real rational reason to change things up in light of what they have experienced or had experienced in the 3 or 4 weeks prior to going to Pocono Raceway. I think they'll make changes for the race that's at the end of July that the three of us are going to. I think that the track itself, by many people, is being unfairly branded. Peter is correct. It is a beautiful location. The Mattioli family has spent tireless hours and numerous resources really revitalizing it year after year after year. And I know next year they're going to a single weekend event with a doubleheader. We will obviously have plenty of time to discuss that, but I think it's a little bit unfair to brand that track as somehow not worthy of having a cup date on the calendar. As far as the action we saw on the track, as both of you know, I am not a huge, and I hope this isn't viewed as heresy to anybody out there. I am not really a huge Formula One fan. And the reason I'm not is if you can get to the lead, it's very hard to pass. It's very hard to take over a leader in Formula One. That's what I saw yesterday, is that kind of action. I'm not so sure that that's what NASCAR wants. I'm pretty sure it's not what they want. But I will say this about the sanctioning body. They are indeed trying. They are trying to make a better product. And for the fans out there that are doubtful, and the fans out there that are, you read it all the time, I'm never going to watch another race. I'm never going to go to another race. I will tell you, it is not in NASCAR's best interest to put on an inferior product. It's simply not in their best interest. The best possible product that NASCAR can put on the track week after week translates to people in the seats, higher TV ratings, more merchandise being sold. There is no advantage to them to just sit back on their heels and say, oh, well, this is what they got. We're just going to go with it. I can guarantee you that they are all in Charlotte and in Daytona today and all week long trying to figure out how do we make Pocono better. And given the fact that Pocono probably resembles Indianapolis more than any other place, how do we avoid the same mistakes when we get to Indy? So I think people need to dial it back a bit on bashing Pocono and bashing the sanctioning body, because it isn't in their interest at all to put out an inferior product. And that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole thing from yesterday. We've been going to Pocono for many, many years. And, when it was a 500-mile race, boy, I'll tell you, you use that middle section of the day to go get food and whatnot because not too much was going to happen. So, I think that we have seen, the proverbial stinker, if you will, but I don't think we're going to see it again. I think NASCAR is going to get to work on it pretty quickly. Peter, thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. I think you hit it on the right spot there when bringing up Indianapolis. There's a lot of pressure on Indianapolis as of late, especially from the NASCAR side. We're looking at last year was the first year that the race was moved from July to, I believe it was September. It was like right close to the playoff cut line. And now we're starting to see that it's going to be moved yet again. It's going to be moved to the July weekend next year. So it's switching with the Coke the Coke Zero 400. So Indy's on the move. I think that shows, as Rick was saying before, NASCAR's not going to sit around. They really want to get things right. They want to get things right for the fans because it's in their best interest to put on the greatest show for us, and to make sure that everybody's interested in the sports thriving and healthy. I think they can't afford, as Rick said, they cannot afford to allow lackluster racing at Indy to go on yet again, especially with, imagine all the storylines that are going into your last race before your playoff or your chase format, whatever you want to call it. If you have a follow the leader Formula One-esque race, you're going to have a lot of upset people that are just beyond livid with watching a follow the leader type race. It's not what people pay, the fair price of a ticket to come and watch. That's not what NASCAR's been. We've seen a constant trend in the 2020 rules package, really reaffirms this, that the fans and the sport sees that short tracks and road courses seem to be the premium. That's what people want to see. They want to see close competitive racing with side-by-side action, some passes for the lead, some passes mid-pack. That's what we want. We don't want to see this strung out, follow the leaders type stuff. I think this package overall, as we've said before, has its moments. I think Charlotte last week was a great example where the field was much tighter. There was constant tight racing all throughout, and we haven't seen those runaways like we saw, a few years ago in the 600, where Martin Truex Jr., for example, he had the field beat. It almost looked like a Richard Petty race where he was about to lap everybody. So there's definitely things in the motions that NASCAR is working, but I couldn't agree more. When you said that the Pocono race yesterday really reminded you of a Formula One race, I know Anthony and myself, we follow Formula One. I think he's much more of an avid fan than myself. I'm more of an Indianapolis kind of guy. But when you watch that, and, even though you marvel at the technology and the sheer and raw talent of those drivers that are in that series, you can't help to think it's a bit boring sometimes when you can kind of predict the winner before the race even happens. So we don't want to see NASCAR go down that route. And hopefully, like Rick says, before they arrive back in July, if they truly think that they could figure out something to do with this package to get the racing better for July, I hope they can.
Anthony, some thoughts?
I think this race is going to turn a lot of focus, especially seeing how they handle Pocono 2 at the end of July. I think it's going to put a lot of focus on Indy, whether or not they can put a good product on there, whether they found a good spot for it on the schedule, being the season closer. We know it changes next year. I wouldn't be surprised especially if Pocono 2 is a repeat performance, so to say, for this race. Let's also not forget this race was a cool race by Pocono standards. The July race is going to likely be hot and slick, and cars are probably going to move around. There might be a little bit more mistakes or cars sliding up in the turns for opportunities to pass. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see a change in the rules package for Indy this year, even so drastic as putting in that all-star package, the universal splitter, the openings in the roof or in the hood that we saw. That did really actually, I think, in my opinion, created better racing than it did in the 600. I would not be shocked at all if NASCAR goes that route. I think if they want to salvage or save the racing at Pocono and make it an entertaining race, that they're going to have to throw the kitchen sink at it this year, just to save it from falling off the calendar after the 2020 season. And I think Pocono 2 is going to be a huge indicator as to whether or not the racing at Indy is going to be any different than we've seen in years past. And the product that they've put on in the years past just simply has not been that exciting. That's why they needed the initial shakeup anyway. And last year's race, for the most part, with the exception of the end with a few shuffle placements for the playoffs, just, it was a race you really won't remember in years to come. It's not going to be a race you talk about. There haven't been a lot of Brickyard races where you talk about the race as a historical landmark or a historical point in time, other than Jeff Gordon winning his first, Jeff Gordon winning his last, Dale Earnhardt winning his first, maybe Bill Elliott winning his last. I think Bill Elliott's last ever win was a Brickyard. There's a few poignant races here and there, but you're never going to get that big moment other than maybe when Kyle and Martin tangled up in turn one and had that little blowout in pit road between crew chiefs at the end. That's really the only time we've ever talked about something that's happened years past that was anything worthwhile at the Brickyard. So I wouldn't be surprised if they take a huge swing at the package.
all good points, and we will see how that all plays out over the next 5 weeks or so as we lead up to Pocono 2. The second topic of the evening is Kyle Busch. And, I think one of the things that everybody has to be mindful of is we are watching one of the great talents to come along in our sport in a long, long time. Unfortunately, what comes with that is a personality that is, well, I guess prickly is the kindest way you can put it. Kyle won his 55th Cup race yesterday and tied Rusty Wallace. And the question becomes, where do we think he ends up when he decides to hang up his helmet? Peter, where do you think Kyle Busch ends up in the pantheon of NASCAR greats?
Ooh, I mean it's a tough one to predict. I would say safely he's gonna be well among the top 5. But then again, I didn't think Jimmy Johnson would have stopped or slowed down anywhere near what we've seen in the last few years with Jimmy Johnson. I had Jimmy pegged with almost a shoe-in for that 8th title, and I really thought that if anybody was going to pass David Pearson when Jeff Gordon hung it up, I thought it would be Jimmy Johnson. Kyle Busch seems to have ascended to become that next man up. We've seen him pass Lee Petty. Now he's tied with Rusty Wallace, and he'll be one race away from breaking. I believe that would be 10th all time with Rusty. He's well on his way. If and I was trying to do the math before, if he continues on the trend that he's at, and he's only 33, 34 years old right now, if he continues on that trend for another 6 years or so, that gets him to about 40 years of age, where we tend to see drivers at this stage begin that process of retiring. We're looking at maybe getting him to 73 wins. I think he's going to get to Dale Earnhardt. Again, if he wins 3 to 4 races, that gets him there. But again, 40 years old. I mean, if he goes another 5, he's well up there. He may be right below David Pearson when it's all said and done. I think 105 is very tough to catch. I think 93 and 83, 84 is very, very doable for Kyle Busch, especially if he continues on this trend and doesn't fall off like we saw Jimmy Johnson recently. So I do think you could see him possibly end 3rd or 4th all time. But I think Petty and Pearson are untouchable still.
Anthony?
I was looking at the numbers also, just like Peter was. Kyle Busch is 34 years old. The trend and fall off for NASCAR drivers seems to be around the 41, 42 year mark. If you're a really good talent in the sport, that's where you normally start to see the drop off. We kind of started to see that with Jeff. We started to see that a little bit with Jimmy, or we're seeing it with Jimmy now. He's sitting at 55. He just passed Lee Petty, just tied Rusty for 9th all time. I think he's sitting at 10th respectively because of that. I could see him reaching Earnhardt Sr. He only needs 20 more wins for that. If you look at the trend for Kyle over the last few years, last year he had 8 wins. The year before that, he had 5. And then before that, or leading up to that, his whole career, with the exception of a remarkable 2008 season and a very good bounce back in 2015, where he won 5 of 25 races that he ran in that injury season, his magic number seems to be between 3 and 4 wins more often than just 1 win. In order for him to reach somebody like Yarborough or Jimmy, if Jimmy stays where he is, or Bobby, he'd have to win 5 races a year on average before he reaches 40 or 41 to reach them. For Dale, he's more in his sweet spot of an average of 4 races a year, but that's an average. If you eliminate the 4 really strong seasons that Kyle's had, that being 2018, 17, and 15 and 2008, he's averaging probably 3 wins a year. over the course of the rest of his career. I think Earnhardt's number of 74 or 76 wins is definitely achievable by the time he's all said and done. I'd be very impressed if he reaches somebody like Jeff Gordon. I don't think he will, but I can definitely see him reaching Earnhardt and definitely like sniffing at the rear of somebody like Darrell Waltrip and Bobby Allison before all is said and done. But again, like you said, Rick, earlier, he's one of the sport's top talents that we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years, not just what's on the track right now. This could very well be a driver who averages 5 or 6 wins a year for the next 6 years. But if you look at the numbers and you take away those really strong, almost like kind of odd years for him where he just went on really good runs, he's averaging about 3 to 3.5 wins a year. It'll be really hard for him to hit Bobby Allison if that's what the trend is. But if he gets a few of those 5 and 8 wins sprinkled throughout there to bring up his average, Bobby Allison and Darrell Waltrip are definitely achievable as well. I don't see him getting up to Jeff Gordon, though.
He's got 4 so far this year. How many more do you think that he's got in the tank this season?
With MTJ running the same equipment, same manufacturer, with guys like Chase and Kurt Busch and Kyle Larson showing speed with Chevy, with Penske already also having 4 wins this year, I can see him maybe achieving 7. I'd be shocked if he only gets 1 more. I think he sweeps Pocono with this package. I think if you start up front and you're a driver like Busch is, I think he sweeps the season there. So I could see him definitely hitting 5. I'd be surprised if he doesn't reach 6 or 7, but I'm not sure he'll reach 8 or 9. Like, I was watching that race yesterday. I think Martin Truex would have given him a darn good run if he didn't blow that motor. So I could see him hitting 6 or 7, but I think, again, this is just because his team picked up on this package quick at the beginning of the season, and I think that's where the advantage was. I think if everybody was on even ground, everybody was struggling, including Kyle's team, I don't think he has 4 wins this year. They were just lucky enough to pick up on it the quickest, and that's where they snuck those 3 really quick races out. Look, between that 3rd win and this 4th win, he's been good, but he hasn't been that great. And again, to Kyle's own comments, this was a track where it was hard to catch and hard to pass. So this might have helped Kyle get that 4th win.
Peter, how many more do you think he has in the tank this season? And is he the guy, or is he the guy to beat?
Ooh, I mean, to throw a number, I think it's pretty tough, like Anthony said. I think 6 or 7 is probably realistic. To say 1 more, I feel like would be definitely a low sell. I can't see him just winning 1 more race. Again, we're at that point where we're just about halfway. So, I mean, if the trend continues, halfway at 4, we'd see him at 8. I think that's way too high. So I think 6 or 7's that sweet spot. But again, we have so many drivers, even drivers that are winless, that are so close. I mean, you look at the guys who have won a race. Anthony's hit it right on the head. Martin Truex Jr. is definitely going to be a guy that is going to be there right with him every step of the way. They have shown no signs of slowing down since transferring over to the 19 team. And like Anthony said, regardless of what happened at Pocono, that doesn't happen. That engine doesn't blow on that 19 car. He was going to be there right with him. He had the speed. He's got the same car, the equipment, and he's proven he's been the guy to get it done and prevent Kyle Busch from that 2nd championship as well. The last few years they've battled at Homestead. Truex has been way better than Kyle Busch, has led more laps. He's been up front much more often than Kyle, and they've both been in the same title hunt. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be with him every step of the way. I still think, and I know we spoke about him last time, I still think we're going to see Kevin Harvick just surge at any point this summer. I think that he is so close. We'll talk about the miscues that the 14 had in a little while, I'm sure, but you can't keep Kevin Harvick out of the win chart. He's right there. The Stewart-Haas teammates that he has, Amarola continues to show performance. Boyer has been really, really hot of late, and even Suarez. Suarez looks like he could probably notch one at any moment too. There's speed there. That's 4 drivers that haven't got a win yet that could very much so in this summertime. Again, I'm still looking at Alex Bowman. I really think Bowman's going to break through. Byron's showing speed. However, they can't seem to put together a complete race. They start great, but there's a lot of drivers, winless drivers and drivers who have already got one that can very, very much cause problems for Kyle Busch to win many more races over the course of the season.
Yeah. Wait until we start revisiting some of these tracks. It's going to get real interesting.
So let's address what so many people have talked about today, and that is Kyle's comments in the post-race interview room regarding the package, getting fairly surly with Ryder from the Pocono record. It's funny, he is a massive talent, but I view him as being somewhat bankrupt socially. It's hard to be an ambassador for this sport and be as surly as he is. The immediate comparison that I always look to is Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart is a wonderful driver, a wonderful person, but someone who, admittedly, can be a difficult person to deal with. He approached a lot of his concerns directly with the sanctioning body. He didn't spend a whole lot of time in interviews just bashing things, although he did from time to time. But he developed tremendous respect with the sanctioning body. And I can't help but wonder, where is Kyle missing the boat? Is he just not getting the memo that he is a massive talent and he could have a tremendous voice in the sport if he would just, drop the surly act for just a little bit. Anthony, what are your thoughts on that?
I did a lot of listening to NASCAR radio. I did a lot of reading on the forums just to try to get as global of an opinion going into this as possible. When I first listened to the interview on, I think it was on Overdrive with Claire B. Lang directly after the race on my way home. I gotta say, sadly, I wasn't shocked that it was something that Kyle Busch said. The criticism over the package, I think he's getting tired of being asked about it. I think he's getting targeted with the questions because they know that they can get a headline out of Kyle. But then again, he won the race, so he's going to get the questions. There's no avoiding it. It was a pretty dry, cutthroat Kyle Busch kind of response. Dry sarcasm, drenched in dry humor. Very critical, like you said. Very Smoke, I think, was one of the best when it came to bringing opinions to the fans, but also taking care of it with the sanctioning body. He would kind of also almost make like a joke out of it to the fans, get a little bit of a rise, but not appear to be off-putting in any way. It seems like whenever Kyle criticizes, he almost doesn't realize how much of an eye is on him. But what I gotta, the one thing that I'm taking from this is, and what a lot of people brought up on the radio shows and the forums is, you got a guy, and Tony Stewart was mentioned a lot in comparison, or to try to compare and contrast the behaviors between the two. You had a guy like Smoke who would criticize, critique, make fun of, whatever you want to say about him, but people looked up to him because of the person he was, the role model he was, what he stood up for, and the fact that he did care about the sport and talked to the sanctioning body to try to improve the sport. Kyle kind of just seems like he's the kind of guy who just cries about what doesn't work for him, and whether he does or not, I don't know. There's probably not many people that would know whether or not he goes to the sanctioning body, has these talks that the other drivers have probably had. Like we know that Jimmy Johnson has had, Smoke had. The thing that worries me, and Rick, you also as a parent, is he somebody that you want your kid to look up to? And a lot of people were calling in, and I share the same opinion, where he is a great driver. He puts a lot of wins up. He puts great numbers up. So if you're an aspiring race car driver, he is somebody to look up to with talent. But if you're a fan, he's not somebody I want my kid to look up to, because he's not really a role model. He's a great example of how to be a great race car driver. But other than that, there's nothing that he shows the public that makes you want to like him outside of the track. He's, to me, he I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. If you look at Kurt, right around the same age that Kyle is right now, Kurt was going through some issues. But you also would think that Kyle would learn from older brother and kind of know how to avoid certain criticisms. The universal answer whenever anybody criticizes Kyle is Kyle's going to be Kyle. I don't know how much longer that can stand. Mars loves him, Coach loves him, so I think he's got a big old shield to hide behind when it comes to things like that. This is the personality that got him out of the 5 car with Hendrick Motorsports and replaced by Dale Jr. Remember, he got replaced by Dale Jr. with Casey Mears on that team. The only thing that saved Casey Mears was he didn't have Kyle Busch's attitude. And it doesn't seem like he's learned.
And before I turn this over to Peter for his thoughts, I do want to say something about, where I'm coming from, in my opinion, on Kyle. You cannot take anything away from him as far as talent is concerned. He is a massive, massive talent. He's also one of about 40 human beings on the planet who get the privilege of doing this every week. Anyone who has ever sat behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, has sat behind the wheel of a lawnmower, a go-kart, heck, even just wheeling a grocery cart around the store, doesn't dream of being in the spot that Kyle Busch is able to be in each and every week. And I do agree with you. I think, having a somewhat off-putting personality, somewhat of a surly personality is not a bad thing necessarily, but he is consistently like that. And he's not really the ambassador for the sport that he could be and perhaps should be. I'm a little bit troubled. I'm a little bit troubled by the comments that he makes in these press briefings and debriefings. He gives the appearance that, and you talk about, being an ambassador for sport, working with the sanctioning body, being a voice for the sport. He almost gives the appearance that he doesn't care about that. He just wants to go out and race and win and make his money, and that's it. And what needs to be understood, I think, by Kyle and the people around him is that he has chosen to be in the spot that he's in. I made a comment off air earlier today to both of you, that I know NASCAR wants these guys in the interview room. There's a certain protocol regarding that. But if he doesn't want to answer these questions, he should probably do what Steve Carlton used to do with the Phillies and the Cardinals, and that is just don't talk to anybody. What I was troubled by more than anything else with yesterday's interview in the media center was the fact that this was not somebody who was pigeonholing him immediately after getting out of the car, on the track or in victory lane. This was a good hour or so after the race. He had plenty of time to collect his thoughts. He had plenty of time to calm himself down. And that's what I find troubling, is that he didn't have, and I'm just going to use the word, he didn't have the class or the poise is the right word, I guess, to take a step back and say, we've been through this. I did win. There are things about the package that most of us weren't happy with. I trust that NASCAR will address those things. And, now we're going to focus our attention on Michigan. That's all he had to say to that reporter. And here I am, someone who is not a seasoned athlete. I won't kid you. I do have a fairly lengthy history in communications, but that's right off the top of my head. That wasn't rehearsed or anything. That's all he had to do is say, we had a great day. We won. There's things about the package that I'm not happy with, that I'm sure a lot of drivers aren't happy with, that I think the fans are probably not happy with. But I trust that the sanctioning body is going to make the necessary changes so that when we come back here at the end of July, you'll see a different type of race. Right now, my attention is being focused on next week in Michigan. That's all he had to say. Peter, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I could certainly agree with you there with him addressing that in a much different manner. However, I really think that Kyle Busch, for what it's worth, he's unapologetically who he is. He understands it. You guys have hit it on the right marks as well. He is a race car driver. He has full intentions of, I'm a race car driver. I love to race. I want to win. I want to win as many races, as many championships as I possibly could want to win. And to be completely honest with you, the whole role model aspect of it, I really don't think he cares. But that being said, he has shown moments where he does. He does reach out to the fans. I mean, there's been several times where, it can be said that he'll patrol the infield, or he'll see somebody repping, some 18 gear, whether he's driving on the road, and he'll Instagram or social media about it, where he'll be like, hey, give me your hat, and sign it as he's passing them in the traffic, leaving the speedway, or walking the grounds and meeting somebody. And it's usually when he's in good spirits. As Anthony pointed out, we spoke about this before. It's usually only after a Kyle Busch victory that you see him patrolling the grounds and doing something like that.
And I doubt he did it after Pocono.
100%. Guaranteed. If you compare that to somebody else, honestly, probably the perfect person to compare him with is Brad Keselowski, his nemesis. Keselowski does that almost every weekend, and Keselowski's the one doing that win or lose, going to fans saying thanks for coming out, appreciate you, learning their name, and then saying their name back to them as a way he kind of picked that up off of Jeff Gordon, how he addresses people. But again, Kyle Busch is unapologetically who he is. That's what I want to stick to there. He's not going to play the politician or be very presidential. He's going to tell you like it is. He's going to tell you how he feels, and when he doesn't want to, as childish as this sounds, and he doesn't want to do something that he does not want to do, he's not going to do it. And I think that's why he rubs a lot of fans the wrong way. This is a sport where many of the fans are are mostly adult males. And adult males aren't going to want to root for someone who's whining and complaining constantly. It's just a bad look, when this sport was kind of brought up with blue collar, hardworking, tough nosed drivers. They didn't whine and complain and sound like a tween or a teenager that didn't get their way when their toy got taken away. And that's how Kyle came off, in my opinion, when he kind of exploded when he said, "Don't ask me about the package anymore." It just sounded like he just didn't want to deal with it. He could have handled it the way Rick said, and was just like, you know what, glad we got the win. Hard working effort from my team. Proud of them for getting me the track position, doing what we needed to do. Probably wasn't the most entertaining of races with this package. Hopefully NASCAR and everybody behind the scenes can work it out, figure it out, and give us a better package. More entertaining for the fans come July. That's all he really had to do. But again, the explosion then leads to reactions from everybody else, whether it's the media or the fans. And Anthony was the perfect person to listen to all of that. He just took that all in, and he was texting us. I remember saying that, "Oh my God, you can't believe what's going on right now," as people, from the media and from fans were just blowing it up, saying that, it's just a bad look. I know he alluded to how he lost the ride in the 5 car before. Again, they decided and opted to keep Casey Mears on the team opposed to Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch is a tremendous talent, but that says a lot about his character and the character that somebody like Rick Hendrick would employ, to not keep somebody like him around, regardless. The last thing I want to say about him, and this really rubbed me the wrong way. Again, I am in no means to really judge him on this merit. I don't own a team of my own. I would love to someday, but I don't think that's in the cards unless I'm just playing fantasy NASCAR or something. But he's got 2 young drivers on his team. Now, I don't know if he handpicked those drivers. Maybe you guys can clarify that, or TRD, Toyota Racing Development, did as well. But he's got Todd Gilliland and Harrison Burton on his truck teams. And Adam Stern reported, among other people, that they were talking about the performance of KBM without Kyle Busch in the car, and how you rated the the ongoing truck season so far to this point. And he gave them a 2 out of 10, and he said they ain't doing, and you can fill in the rest of that there. It was an expletive. With that being said, these are 2 young drivers that are highly touted. They were great in ARCA, they were great in K&N. They just haven't gotten the wins. And for him to publicly come out and kind of throw them under like that, one, I get it. He's trying to light a fire under them. They've got the best equipment in trucks racing for him. But I just, again, I'm nowhere the judge in this scenario. I'm not in his shoes, but I wouldn't do it that way. And I feel like that describes Kyle Busch perfectly. He doesn't know when, and you guys mentioned Tony Stewart before, he doesn't know when to be political. That's something you do behind closed doors. That's something you say like, hey, Harrison, Todd, this isn't working out. We've gotten you everything that you need. What's not working? We have to figure this out. And I'm sure those conversations are going on, but when they surface to the media and he comes off just kind of underselling the people around him, that's it's just a bad look overall.
Yeah, and that's it's too bad because he's so massively talented, and you can't take any of that away from him. And you kind of wonder if this isn't the way this won't play out. And we've seen this in sports throughout history. Guys that just while they were active participants, just kind of didn't get it. They were nasty cusses who just ran afoul of the media, ran afoul of a significant portion of the fans. Didn't get along particularly well with their teammates, and then they retire, and then they mellow, and they look back at their careers years later, and all of a sudden there's a mellowing by them as individuals, and a revisiting of the talent by the public. You can look at some examples in recent history. People like Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson was not a nice guy. I mean, he came to the Yankees and immediately bashed the most beloved player the team had seen in decades. And yet now you look at him, and he was an elder statesman. You can't deny the talent the man had, the ability to rise to the occasion whenever it was needed. And it took many years into retirement for him to get that kind of respect. And you can't help but wonder if that's not the path we're going down. That right now Kyle doesn't care, and he's oblivious to what's going on other than week to week winning and making millions and millions of dollars, and having his own little fan base, which isn't quite so little, believe it or not. And you can't help but wonder when he is in retirement whether this won't all come back to him, and he will have a true appreciation of just how fortunate he has been all these years. So you hope that he wakes up before that happens. Speaking of drivers and drivers that are associated with legacy and the history of our sport, I cannot let this show end tonight without talking about Chase Elliott. he is really, you know, and I know there's a lot of young drivers out there, and we keep talking about people like Larson and Suarez and, you know, Byron and Bowman and guys that are on the horizon like Bell and, you know, guys that are coming up. And we always wonder, are they the real deal? There is no question that Chase Elliott, we are going to be talking about him for decades. Anthony, your thoughts on that young man and what he's done so far?
As popular as this kid is, he's one of the quietest, most underrated drivers of the season, in my opinion. If you look at his stats compared to Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, I'm only pointing those two drivers out because they're the only two ahead of him in the standings as far as points. He's got the one win, 6 top fives, 5 of which have come in the last 5 straight races, and 7 top tens. Kyle Busch has 57 more points with 3 more wins, 2 more top fives, and 5 more top tens. And a win also, I believe, counts as a top 5. So with 3 extra wins, he only has 2 more top 5s in Chase. The consistency that he has shown throughout the year, even when he didn't finish in the top 10, he was really close. They're a team that does not give up. They're a team that is finding more and more speed. And to hear Chase Elliott's interview post-race, where any of the other drivers, in my opinion, other than a handful of maybe somebody like Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, there's a trend here, Jimmy Johnson, if you can see what the similarities are between them, probably would have just given an interview saying, yeah, we had a great day, top 5 finish, couldn't ask for more. Chase Elliott basically gave an interview saying 4th was nice, but we still got work to do. And he knows the potential of that team is limitless if they hit their stride. They showed it last year towards the end of the year, banging out 3 wins in the second half of the season, when nobody thought they would probably get another win other than the one that they got at the Glen. I think they're going to hit. They're already hitting on all cylinders. Now they just got to hit that overdrive button and pull out a few more wins for this season. I think you got to consider him a contender come playoff time, because consistent and getting those top 5s will get you to Phoenix, hoping and battling for a spot at Homestead. And the first 26 of the races are nice. Homestead's the goal. If he can keep up the consistency the way that team has, Jeff Gordon gave him and Allen the biggest compliment at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony this past February. Jeff Gordon looked at Alan Gustafson and said, I'm sorry I couldn't get you a championship, but you got quite a few coming towards you. I can promise you that with that driver you have. They're proving this year that even though they aren't always contending for a win, they're a championship caliber team. Just look at the stats, look at the drivers they're surrounded by. He's got 1 win. Everyone around him has 4, 3, 2, and 3 wins. And he's over 100 points past Martin Truex Jr. He's 100 points ahead of Denny Hamlin. Kevin Harvick is having a really consistent year without any win, so he's hovering in 5th. The consistency that he gets and how quiet he does it is just amazing. He's still young. I think he's 23 years old. He's just hitting his stride. He's just picking up speed. Very impressive to get 5 straight in any series. For him to do it in the last 5 races, where it's Talladega, Kansas, Charlotte, Pocono, for the most part, all completely different tracks. Martinsville was one of, I think, the 5 where he had the streak. For him to show that kind of talent at those different tracks gets me really excited when they go back to those racetracks, and really excited come playoff time, because that whole team just seems to kick it up an extra gear. No matter how they're performing in the regular season, they step it up going into playoffs. And to me, it's kind of reminiscent of Jimmy and Chad. Didn't matter how they did in the regular season, playoffs they always stepped it up.
Before I go to Peter with this, and Peter, I want you to think about what I'm asking both of you now. We just had a very substantial discussion on a driver who's massively talented, who really isn't the best standard bearer representing the sport. Are we watching the next face of NASCAR? Peter, your thoughts?
I definitely think so. He has the personality though that he kind of embraces that, I feel like, but at the same point he's like, hey, I'm just gonna go out and race too. He comes from that heritage. He comes from that line of a legacy fan favorite driver that was loved and revered by the NASCAR faithful, and his father Bill Elliott. He inherited the famous 24 car, which is now the number 9. To keep that family tradition going. He's primed in that position just based on who he is and the seat he got. However, he'd be the first one to tell you, just like how Bubba Wallace says it, I'm here to race. I just want to race. And, if everybody wants to support me, if they want to root for me and vote for me as the most popular driver, that's all awesome. And he embraces it. He thanks him for it. And I think he's got nowhere to go but up with that. He certainly is going to be the new face, this next generation coming. He's the most popular. I believe he's the most talented. And I think he's got the one that's got the most staying power. Just based on his driver talent and abilities, as Anthony was saying before, he does really remind me of Jimmy and Chad. He's able to just be so smooth. I haven't seen a rookie come into this sport as smooth and as poised as he has been in such a long time. I mean, I don't even think I could say that about like Keselowski and Logano coming in, because they were very, very, very just loose cannon. And he just seems to be able to put these races together. And these 5 top 5s in a row that he has strung together, he's putting this season on notice. He's starting to get spoken about. It's not enough for him. He wants to be up there passing Kyle Busch. He's not afraid of him. He's not afraid of how powerful the Joe Gibbs Racing or Penske teams are. I think Gustafson shows that as well. He's encouraging his team to keep working, and he knows it's not enough. I think that's really something awesome to see. And like I said before, I really think he's putting them on notice. He's climbed to 3rd in points. He's got 1 win. We saw him take three years to get to 1 win, and that came in the later goings of the season. Now he's got 1 early. He's got that pressure off his back. He's shown that he won't be pushed around anymore. We've seen that over the last few seasons after the incidents with Hamlin, that he's not going to take it from anybody, and he knows how to get it done. He has the confidence. I mean, when I see him on race weekends, I see him like exude the confidence. I didn't see that the first 2 seasons and for the beginning half of last year, but there was something different last year from the start and the drop of Daytona. After he was pushed around by that 11 car, that something changed. There was a big change in him, and now I feel like you're seeing a Chase Elliott that really reminds me of all drivers. He reminds me of Jeff Gordon a lot, and I really think that we're gonna see Chase really rise. And I hope that it's a long and successful rise, because it's going to be an awesome thing to see. That's for sure. So I really think that he's positioning himself at this point. He's positioning himself to be one of those guys you got to talk about going deep into these playoffs. I don't think 1 win's going to be enough. I think he's going to have to try to notch at least 2 more to really be in the conversation with Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. and possibly either Joey Logano or Brad Keselowski. But he's definitely a guy that's on my radar for sure. And is performing at a remarkable pace right now, where, like I said before, when we were talking about Bowman and among other things, you asked us this question a month ago or so when Chevrolet was still really struggling, and this probably wouldn't have been something we've considered. But that being said, with the exception of Kurt Busch, Chase was still fighting hard, regardless of Chevy's struggles. So he's been awesome to see. This is his best season yet. I hope it keeps going, and I wish him all the luck.
Anthony, final words on the driver of the 9 car.
Yeah, I think he's poised to stay for a very long time. I think you're looking at the new keystone or keynote driver for Hendrick Motorsports. I could see him improving year after year. The kid's shown that he can handle the pressure. I think that all boils down to who raised him, and I don't mean just because his father's Bill Elliott, so Bill Elliott's got good racing genes and passed him down. It's how he was raised. He was raised humble. He was raised in the spotlight for the most part. He was always around the racetrack. So he knows the ins and outs. To him, the racetrack is just like being at home. He's used to it. A lot of these drivers haven't been racing for as long as he has, and they're older than him, and they haven't been around the spotlight as long, so they don't necessarily know how to handle the pressure or the spotlight. That's why you see that a lot of these guys flame out. Chase's potential, I really do truly believe is unlimited. I don't know if he's the type of driver that you're going to be talking about in 20 years, rivaling the amount of wins that Jimmy Johnson has or Jeff Gordon has. I think the potential is definitely absolutely there. But he's got like that talent of Jeff Gordon with the personality and homeliness of a Dale Jr. that just makes him hard not to like and hard not to be the center of the sport. And for him to be so like the age that he is, I think he's coming into the sport at a perfect time where you need a good guy to root for. He came in just as Dale Jr. was on the way out. He easily took over the most popular driver award, and that's just because the personality that he's got. He's to me he's the exact carbon copy of what Dale Jr. was to a lot of his fans, and he's a guy you go to cheer for on Sunday, and you'd love to have a beer with any other day of the week and just talk anything at all, music, racing, animals, hunting, fishing, anything under the sun, and he's just going to be a cool guy that you're going to want to hang out with. So I think he's on a historic rise that this sport it hasn't seen probably since the rise of Jeff Gordon and Dale Jr.
Interesting takes, and the great thing about this sport is that just when you think things are not going all that well, along comes somebody like Chase Elliott and single-handedly puts us back where we have been accustomed to being.
Yeah.
Last topic of the evening is to talk about some of the things that have been going wrong for certain drivers. The three that come to mind are Austin Dillon, the continued woes of Kyle Larson, which, boy, I'll tell you just got a feel for the guy, and the pit road problems that Kevin Harvick has had. And Harvick had a pretty good machine yesterday, but boy, son of a gun, he's snake bit with some of these strategic errors that are going to be being made on pit road. Anthony, what do you think about these three guys? Dillon finds himself on the bubble now, and then we've been talking about Harvick. He's still fifth in points. He puts up, it's amazing after the miscues yesterday that it didn't really hurt him a whole lot. But at some point in time, they got to fix this, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's three different drivers, like you said, in three completely different scenarios with three completely different sets of circumstances in front of them. If you look at Austin's record in Cup Series, he's really kind of sitting right around where he normally sits at this time of year. Last year, he had the help of getting the Daytona 500 victory right up out of the way, so a lot of people never worried about where he was for the most part in points. I believe he was always kind of hovering in that 13th to 16th position last year. Same the year before, even after the Coke 600. In theory, I think he was top 10 in points because of the win where it placed him. But when you look at the actual points chart, he was still sitting in the mid-teen area, kind of just barely making it. It was one of those the 2 years or 3 years that he's been in the playoffs now. where it's almost like, all right, can he get out of that first round? So for him to be hovering where he is now, he's a little lower than the averages for him. But that's not the big shock. To me, the big shock is how much bad luck Larson is having. And I'll separate that from the type of bad luck that Harvick is having. I think a lot of Harvick's bad luck because of the pit road issues are very big self-inflicted wounds that the crew is imposing on themselves. Maybe they're feeling a little too much pressure to try to pull out a win, and that's where these mistakes are coming from. They're trying to dig themselves out of a hole, and in reality, all they're doing is burying themselves even deeper. Larson just seems to be having this really cursed dark cloud over his head where nothing can go right his way. It's nothing that the crew is doing. It's nothing that he's doing. I know they had the mishap at Atlanta where the crew or he was caught speeding, but he's learned from that. He hasn't had another one of those penalties. It's just been horrible luck he can't dig out of. I was hoping that the candle that him and Jeff Gordon went to go get, that voodoo candle at Dover, was going to help him out of it. We'll see. I think he's just got to get the stars aligned right for him to get back on track. I don't know what can fix Kyle's luck right now. Harvick's, I think they kind of just got to take a little bit of pressure off themselves. Look at where they are in the standings. With no wins, they're ahead of Joey Logano and Truex, who has 3 wins. Chomping at the bits of it. I think they're sitting in 5th in points. They're chomping behind Brad Keselowski, or Denny Hamlin. They're fine. They don't need to win now. Like we said yesterday or last week in the broadcast, I think you could get kind of worried if he doesn't win by the second Pocono race. And he definitely proved yesterday that he can contend to win at Pocono just like he has the last few years. So I think still a win at the second Pocono race is a big chance for them. He doesn't have to win in the regular season to contend in the playoffs. They're a team that can get it together. All they got to do is eliminate the mistakes. 2 years ago, or even the early last season, they had a few miscues on pit road, but they were still winning races when they weren't having those mistakes. So they got to stop beating themselves. Larson, he needs to find some voodoo magic to get that curse out from underneath him. And I think right now you're kind of seeing the talent cap for Austin Dillon with the equipment that he has and the talent that he's got inside that fire suit. It is a little bit lower of a trend right now, but then again, you're also now seeing guys like William Byron and Alex Bowman, who he was contending with for those cutoff spots the last year or two. Now they're progressing, and it's kind of pushing him further down the totem pole. I also think Ryan Newman and Ricky Stenhouse are above him in points, or just right at his position in points. They're also having a much better than average year for them. So really, I think you're kind of just seeing Austin stuck where Austin is. It's just the talent or the drivers that are usually around him in the points are having a little bit better of a year than he is right now, and that's what's reflecting him. I think he's sitting 20th in points and fighting for it, but even so, sitting at 20th in points, I think he's only about 15, 20 points out of the cutoff spot. So he's really not that far out. He's a good race or two from getting back into it.
Peter, your thoughts on Austin Dillon, Kevin Harvick, and Kyle Larson?
Oh man, those are great guys to talk about. So I'll start with Harvick first. Like I said before, when I was talking about Chase Elliott, I really think Kevin he's right there. He was one mistake away from winning Pocono, yesterday. So there's a good opportunity for Kevin Harvick, and I still think it's coming. I've seen before, and I've heard people call up on NASCAR radio. They were talking about 2 years ago in 2017. It wasn't until Sonoma that he got his first victory. And I think back to that, and I had to take a double take really fast. I was like, no way. He's just been so strong. How could it have been that he didn't win until Sonoma that year? And it was true. and he went on a tear right after Sonoma. So he's another guy. Like how we said that, Chase is slowly but surely kind of creeping in, and he's one of the most underrated drivers that that people aren't really paying too close attention to. You cannot sleep on Kevin Harvick, because the moment he gets that first W, he is coming. That team is not far behind. I still think that all four of those drivers can win, and I think that we may see that by the time we get to Homestead. So Harvick's one guy that it's coming. It's definitely gonna be here this summer. I think he's gonna win very, very shortly. As far as Larson goes, I really think that he still has to give props to Jeff Gordon for getting all those voodoo charms, because I think it did wonders for him. I mean, it got him $1 million a couple weeks later. He seemed to be turning the corner after Dover when that all happened, but this last weekend, you could say he got bit by bad luck again, but I really think that it was more so his own doing, and he owned up to it as well. He tried to shoot for a gap that wasn't there, made a mistake, and that caused enough damage to mirror him back in the mid-20s or wherever he finished. The guy won the first two stages. He had speed. He can get it done. There's something about his season that just keeps striking me the wrong way. There is a lot of bad luck there, and a lot of drivers they'll have years like that. But I'm starting to think that maybe a change of scenery is coming Kyle Larson's way, or it's something that he may need, because for some reason those explosive seasons that he's had when he started to pick it up coming into the sport, it's really kind of gone by the wayside. And I think that it has a lot to do with the package as well. He's a guy that we've spoke about before that needs that high horsepower, very sprint car-esque drive, because he's got so much driver skill and driver talent. He is one of the best in the field, I think. I think he has an immense and insane car control. I just think with this new package, when you really have to get up on the wheel, get aggressive, and try to make something happen, with him and his send it kind of mentality, it's bit him way too much. I think he's trying to do way too much with what he's got. And ultimately, that's costed him and put him in the position he's in. I think he's another guy like Kevin. He can turn it around. We saw him get it done in Charlotte. He is certainly somebody that will be on the radar. I still think he's well inside the playoffs, I believe, at this point. So he's not somebody that I think has to hit the panic button just yet. But I think Kyle Larson, if he can kind of settle in, figure out how he's got to drive this particular car, I think we'll start to see the finishes improve. Austin's interesting. Austin Dillon, as Anthony said, I think that was the perfect response. We're starting to see the guys that he generally races with every given weekend run much better. You see performance out of Jimmy Johnson has increased, although it's been subtle. We've seen William Byron is now qualifying on the pole 2 weekends in a row. He's got a much better starting position. Eric Jones has come to life in recent weeks, with the exception of the mishap at Charlotte. All the guys that Austin Dillon's running against, they've now caught up, and they've gotten better, and they're having a better year at this point in the season. Austin kind of started out much hotter than they did. He had, he had great relationship with Luke Lambert, his crew chief. They trimmed out those race cars, and they were qualifying up front. They were monsters at group qualifying. But ever since we went back to single car qualifying, Austin Dillon has not been as stellar. And track position is so key with this package, and that's something we have not seen with this 3-car whatsoever. So I think they've got a lot of ground to make up. For what it's worth, I was watching his incident from yesterday, and it did look like the 21 car misjudged the corner a little bit, got into him, and took the 3 out. So maybe he would have finished better than where he ended off, but Austin Dillon's in some trouble right now. He's one that I'd hit the panic radar because, as I said before, and as Anthony did as well, everybody's coming. And this is the time where you cannot afford a mulligan. You cannot afford a bad race. We saw Eric Jones last week at Charlotte. He was 13th in points. By the time the Coke 600 was over, he was 17th and outside the playoffs looking in. Had a rebound week this week, but it's going to be a tight race. And especially with the Penske and Gibbs dominance, if nobody else is notching those W's as we get deeper into the summer, it's gonna be a shootout for those final spots. So Austin cannot afford bad runs. Neither can Jimmy Johnson. He's a guy that his finish yesterday was nowhere near as good as he did run. He was close inside the top 10 for most of the day. He can't afford to fall back. You gotta you got to find another gear at this point in the season. And for those guys that we've spoke about, I hope they do.
So up next is the Michigan race, the Irish Hills of Michigan. Typically a great racetrack where you see some terrific action. Very quickly, Anthony, what can we expect in Michigan?
Oh man, I don't know. I think it's going to be another California. A lot of the drivers have been hinting that you're not going to see the kind of racing you saw at Kansas or at Charlotte at Michigan. This is another one of those tracks where the momentum is going to be so high that I don't see how you could really gain runs on. I think they're going to be flat out around this track. It's got more banking than Auto Club. It's got newer, fresher pavement than Auto Club does. I don't see tire fall off being much of an issue. This might be another one of those races, in my opinion, where we're sitting here on Monday night talking about how possibly lackluster the racing was. I think the only thing that might save Michigan is that it's a multi-groove. Maybe the top lane flat out will give you a whole bunch of momentum coming off of the turns onto the straightaways. It's a super long front straightaway. It's a pretty gentle turn into both 1 and 3. So I don't think we're going to see dicey racing action. I think we're going to see some passing. I'm not expecting it to be a Kansas or a Charlotte. That's for sure. I think you're going to see a good race, but I think like I said, I think on Monday we're going to be sitting here thinking that the racing could have been better.
So, Peter, your thoughts on what's going to happen in Michigan?
If you guys will allow me to be a little silly with this one, I expected Pocono to be exciting, exhilarated, and very Indy-esque, I think I called it last week. And I was a little disappointed in what unfolded. So this week for Michigan, as I hear a lot of drivers are ramping up the excitement, they're thinking that it's going to be wild with how the cars suck up to each other. And it's going to be very similar to California and Kansas, which Kansas I love, by the way. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is going to be a snoozer. I'm going to say the complete opposite and hope to be completely wrong because I'd love to see a great race at Michigan. I think the races that they put on there can be pretty awesome. So I'm hoping that this package really does well for another 1.52 mile track because I really think that NASCAR is due for a rebound after last weekend. So I'm hoping that I'll be wrong.
Well, I hope you are as well, as I'm sure most of NASCAR Nation hopes so. We shall see as NASCAR now turns its attention to the Irish Hills at Michigan. Well, it has been a packed evening. We got through a lot of topics. Hopefully, we gave you all some food for thought, talking about Pocono in the rearview mirror, a little bit about Kyle Busch and his 55 wins, tying Rusty Wallace. A little discussion on Kyle's encounter in the media center yesterday after the race, and some drivers who have been having tough days in recent weeks. It has been fun as always. Anthony, can you tell our viewers how they can be more active with all of us here at 3 Wide?
It's the same as always. You guys come across our videos and you like what we're talking about, like the topics, like the direction that we're going with it, hit that subscribe button below the video. Again, if you also hit that bell icon, you'll get instant email notifications and text messages to your devices letting you know that we've scheduled a live event and that we are going live. Comments are always appreciated in the comment section of each video. We'll take our suggestions from viewers and our critiques from viewers seriously, and we will put together a list of topics to talk about based off of the viewers. Other than that, just enjoy the content. Hit the like button on the videos if you like it. And we'll see you guys at the next broadcast.
Peter, speaking of content and topics, you did another absolutely tremendous job of putting together our agenda for tonight's show. Thank you for that. You did a spectacular job, as you always do.
Well, thank you for that. I had a lot of fun. I was, trying to come up with the storylines and things that were going on. We had a lot to work with. Pretty much after Pocono unfolded the way it did. So, to our fans out there and anybody that's watching and listening, if you guys have any topics, as Rick always says before, shoot them our way. We'd love to talk about them. Maybe in the coming weeks or as summer begins to unfold, we'll do like a NASCAR 101 if we've hinted at before. Maybe we can talk about some other avenues, that are, all the rage right now to kind of get more people and definitely the young audience into NASCAR as well. So hopefully we'll keep it coming. I know I got a great team here, so I know you guys got great topics as well. So I look forward to dissecting Michigan. Hopefully it's a wild race, and I can't wait to talk about it.
And over the next couple of weeks, folks, you need to be watching for the reminders and the postings, as we will be doing a special broadcast dedicated to talking about old DW. And that'll be coming up before the race at Sonoma, which will be his last broadcast on the Fox network. Well, it's time to look up towards the spotter stand, and I can see we're getting our signal. And what you have to remember each and every week until that spotter tells you that you are clear, you are
3 wide.
So for Anthony, for Peter, I'm Rick. Have a great week. We will see you after Michigan. Good night, everybody.